Well, greetings, listeners in Listenerland. Welcome to St. Louis in Tune with Arnold Stricker and Mark Langston, where we size up current and historic events involving people, places, and things in areas such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, government, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and sports. We originate from and connect the gateway city to our country's current cultural fabric and lives. Mark Langston will be in shortly. He is en route. As many of you know, we're broadcasting this on the day of the opening day of the Cardinals season. I believe they're playing the Toronto Blue Jays, so Mark is on his way back, not from the game, but from just getting through some traffic right there. And matter of fact, speaking of traffic, we're going to be talking about trafficking. And when I'm not talking about traffic that cars or trucks or bicycles or pedestrians go through, but it's the human kind of trafficking. And that is an egregious kind, and we're going to be talking to a couple guests here in a moment. But one of the things you all need to think about out there is being concerned about weather issues, and I want to mention that as weather changes here in the spring. We have some storms coming up, and one of the things you need to be doing is always checking out the weather broadcast and being prepared for those sudden onslaughts that might come our way. Our guests in studio are going to talk to us about human trafficking. They are experts at this. They've been doing this for a long time. Anna Foster is the Human Trafficking Task Force Coordinator. Sergeant Brian Shanika is Special Investigations Unit at the St. Louis County Police Department. He has worked in this specific field for how long, Brian?
I've been in control of the St. Louis County's Special Investigations Unit, and by proxy, the commander of the Eastern District of Missouri's Human Trafficking Task Force since mid-April 2021.
Wow. And before that, what were you doing?
5.5 years prior to that, I was an investigator for the Bureau of Professional Standards in the St. Louis County Police Department. That's our internal affairs arm. And prior to that, I was an investigator in computer and financial fraud.
So you're kind of an expert at the fraud and the abuse kinds of things that people would go through to take advantage of other people.
I absolutely have experience in all of that area.
And Anna, what is your background in this particular area?
So I've only been working in this role for about over a year now, since last January, but officially the task force has existed, I believe, since 2013 as a formal partnership between the International Institute and St. Louis County Police Department, as well as other federal law enforcement partners, to prevent and respond to human trafficking within the Eastern Federal District of Missouri.
So let's talk about what trafficking is exactly. People hear that, they think of congestion, because they're thinking of automobile or pedestrian kinds of traffic. We're talking about human trafficking, and let's really define that for people so they know exactly what we're discussing here.
Yeah. So human trafficking at its core is about control and money. Simplified, like a good definition to go off of, is it's the exploitation of an individual for the use of commercial sex or forced labor. Brian and I operate off of the federal definition of human trafficking. So when we are looking for a trafficking situation, and I can read the definition here if it's easier.
Yeah, please do.
We use the definition provided by the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, or the TVPA. So that defines sex trafficking as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purposes of a commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not obtained the age of 18 years old, which we can talk about later. Mm-hmm. Labor trafficking, which is another part of what we do, is labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, and coercion for the purposes of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. So something that we can clarify immediately is that there is no such thing as human sex trafficking, and then a differentiation between that and labor trafficking. Human trafficking is the umbrella term, and then labor trafficking and sex trafficking kind of branch off from
subterms of that.
Exactly.
And Brian, there were three words that were mentioned there pretty specifically. I will say them here if I can get them. It was a force, fraud, or coercion. Discuss exactly what those things encompass, because from a law enforcement background.
Absolutely. So what you need to understand in the beginning is that a child under the age of 18 years old cannot consent to anything. So force, fraud, and coercion is not necessary in a prosecution or to be identified as a victim of trafficking in either way, labor or sex trafficking. If you're under 18, you can't consent, and thereby, if you're being forced or coerced into one of these two trades, you're automatically covered. So the three arms we're going to talk about is force, fraud, and coercion, as you said. Force is just exactly as it implies. Anything from a physical restraint to the use of weapons to force another person into compliance to take advantage of them. The fraud is just a little bit more finesse-driven with regard to, if we're talking about the commercial sex trade, you may have a trafficker who uses finesse to convince victims that they need to do things for them in order to survive. And then the coercion is a little bit more into that, to where maybe your documents are being held, your driver's license or your birth certificate or other things like that. You're being coerced into these acts because the trafficker is holding something over you.
Like threats to your family or something like
Exactly.
that.
Absolutely right.
So threats both to you individually or maybe those that you care about or those around you. So me physically, I'm not going to, but like threatening you,
Right.
but I could also be like, I know where your kids sleep. I know where the hospital that your mother is staying at. The threat had to have been received by the individual, and that's just coercion. Fraud, another important thing is, so traffickers target vulnerable individuals. Traffickers are specifically skilled in identifying somebody's vulnerabilities and exploiting it for their own gain.
And who would vulnerable individuals be in our community?
So that can be an incredibly diverse group of people, frankly it is. So we've seen folks who are experiencing homelessness, poverty, the LGBTQ youth, especially in our community, or those who are homeless. Those working at the International Institute, we've definitely seen immigration status as something used to exploit somebody. So any of these vulnerabilities come also with an intersection of a lack of support and a lack of available resources. Because if somebody who was, say, homeless, if they had available resources to them, they would be less likely to believe and follow the false promises of a trafficker in order to meet their basic needs. Because if I was experiencing homelessness, a trafficker could come to me and say, I have a safe place for you to stay. I have a warm bed, a clean shower, and a hot meal. And because I'm struggling to meet my basic needs, I'm going to follow that trafficker and do what they say in order to keep that need. Because again, I'm clearly struggling to meet that basic need. For an immigration status, we know that so many people within our community are undocumented, and that already comes with its own vulnerabilities. If somebody else knows that they're undocumented, that's something they can exploit them over. As in, you're going to do what I say, or I'm going to report you to law enforcement. I'm going to report you to ICE and have you deported. And then you'll be separated from your family, the life that you've tried to build here. And for some folks, going back home is a dangerous situation for them. And so they're going to do everything they can to stay in this situation. So when it comes to fraud, how I was connecting vulnerabilities, traffickers are going to be promising a way to alleviate those vulnerabilities. They're going to be helping you, remove them from your life. So if you're homeless, promising you a safe place to stay. If you're in poverty, promising you a work opportunity that will pay well, support your family well. If you're an individual who's maybe never experienced love or affection or a good model relationship or an intimate relationship, they'll be promising intimacy, connection. And for those missing that, that's something that they'll go for and they'll go after in order to keep that thing that they so desperately need in order to survive.
Now, it's just not an issue here in the state or the country. This is an international kind of thing. And it actually has been going on for a long, long time. This is not anything new. Like indentured servants could be considered, trafficked to a degree, I guess, if you really going to kind of scroll out the definition a little bit. As it relates to those involved in sex trafficking versus labor trafficking, what is the percentages? Is there more in sex trafficking? Is there more in labor trafficking? Or does it depend upon the area or the state, or does it matter?
So we don't like to define the problem in terms of percentages. What I like to say is that trafficking is occurring anywhere. Not everywhere, but anywhere. Those vulnerabilities that are targeted are what draw the traffickers to the trafficking victims, and those vulnerabilities occur everywhere in life.
So it could be your neighbor.
Exactly. And Brian and I we're pretty good at, we don't like to give direct numbers, just because so much of the data that's out there is going to be skewed on folks that they were able to come forward and get to speak to them. Any data that you look at is going to be based on identified victims of trafficking, and we know that as a crime, it's incredibly underreported, just because of the power and control that traffickers have over victims.
Absolutely.
And the nature of the crime to be secretive and covert, to simply never come forward to both law enforcement or to victim service providers if they remain in this situation or if they eventually get out on their own.
Yeah, I was looking at a website, and it's the Human Trafficking Hotline.org website, and they do have some statistics on there. And I can't imagine that somebody who's being trafficked is going to get on there and or call the numbers. And I do want to mention the numbers, though, because I think the numbers are almost as important for people who identify, who may be bystanders, as it may be for the people who are being trafficked themselves. So, folks, this is 888-373-7888, 888-373-7888. You can also text HELP to 233-733, 233-733. And which kind of goes down a path about, we probably see people who are being trafficked all the time. We just don't know it. So how can we be more aware? What are some things that you can give listeners some ideas on, keeping their eyeballs posted, or things look that doesn't look right, or I'm thinking back to that situation, and you don't want to create a false positive here, but at the same time, you don't want to ignore a situation where maybe somebody is really kind of needing some assistance to get out of the situation that they're in.
Yeah, when you're talking about red flags for trafficking victims or traffickers, it can be everyday behaviors that just seem out of place in time for when they're occurring. Okay, just to throw an example out there, if you're at a bus station, which is a known funneling point for trafficking individuals, if you see a child that's accompanied by somebody who doesn't look like that they would be normally with that child, maybe the age disparity is way off, it doesn't appear to be a grandfather or grandchild situation, and the child is displaying overt actions indicating that they're not comfortable in this situation, or they're being directed what to say or what not to say. This is one simple red flag.
Another one to possibly consider is if an individual appears to be socially isolated, or they may be living in somebody's home, but in a place that typically people normally wouldn't, like not where the rest of the bedrooms are, but possibly in an unfinished basement, garage, or attic. Or if you're seeing somebody in a home that doesn't seem to be allowed to go out and speak to people in the neighborhood, or just other members of the family, get a job outside of the home, even go to school. If you're noticing people being treated like a servant, that's also kind of worth mentioning. Any signs of possible debt manipulation or mentioning of owing a debt. If they were to mention that they owe a debt to somebody that they live with, that can be to a lot of things. It could be to maybe getting them a job. It could be to maybe they're a sponsor that helped them arrive here into the United States, or somebody who helped them just get this job in general. Other things worth mentioning are just also general signs of labor exploitation and labor violations. So, abusive labor laws, are people working in an industry without proper equipment? So are they working on a construction site without headgear, masks, goggles? Are they transported to and from work by the same person every single day? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a carpool group. Maybe it's something a little bit more.
Right.
And obviously, if you're hearing somebody being threatened with some type of harm, that's always worth obviously reporting and looking into, because that could be legitimate threats, obviously, to their safety and well-being, both as a possible domestic violence or interpersonal violence situation, but it could also be signs of trafficking.
Okay. We are having a conversation on human trafficking with Anna Foster and Sergeant Brian Shanika from the Special Investigations Unit at St. Louis County Police Department. Anna is with the Human Trafficking Task Force. She is the coordinator for that. We're going to come back and ask some more questions related to human trafficking and how you as individuals out there, we're going to expand on identification. What are some training opportunities that are offered for groups within the community who want to become more knowledgeable about this and just be better observers? So we're going to do that right after our break. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston of St. Louis in Tune. We'll be right back. This is Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune on behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page. On behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation, this has been Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune.
At St. Louis in Tune, we strive to bring you informative, useful, and reflective stories, as well as interviews about current and historic issues and events that involve people, places, and things. We cover a wide range of topics, such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and sports, and that's just to name a few. While St. Louis in Tune originates from the Gateway City and covers local topics, we also connect to what's going on nationally as well. If you missed any of our previously aired programs of St. Louis in Tune, simply visit stlintune.com. That's stlintune.com. There you'll find the show notes and everything that was mentioned in that episode and all the other great episodes as well. And if you've got an area that you'd like us to examine deeper, well, just let us know by dropping us a note at stlintune@gmail.com. That's stlintune@gmail.com. St. Louis in Tune. It's heard Monday through Friday on the USRadioNetwork.com and many great radio stations around the U.S. and, of course, right here in St. Louis. Our website again is stlintune.com. Visit us today. That's stlintune.com.
Welcome back to St. Louis in Tune. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston. We're having a conversation about human trafficking, and that takes the form of sex trafficking and also labor trafficking. We've been talking to two individuals here. Anna Foster's the coordinator for the Human Trafficking Task Force, and Sergeant Brian Shanika is the Special Investigations Unit officer at the St. Louis County Police Department who handles this. And before the break, we were talking about some training opportunities, and I mentioned the ATIP program, which is kind of based out of the International Institute of St. Louis here. And Anna, why don't you talk a little bit about that ATIP program and give people I'm giving them the acronym, and it actually means what?
It means the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Program, so lovingly called ATIP, and it's just social service industries really like acronyms, and so we continue to use acronyms for a lot of things. So our services, thank you, our services include intensive case management services to all survivors of human trafficking. So regardless of age, gender identity, sexual orientation, victimization status, we will be able to work with you as a victim of trafficking to provide screening, crisis intervention, safety planning, short-term financial assistance for a lot of our folks, helping applying for benefits, and referrals to additional services, including law enforcement, if they would like to pursue investigation and prosecuting their traffickers. Our program has seen an incredibly diverse group of people. The oldest person that we had in our program was 72 years old,
Wow.
and they were trafficked as a home health aide by a family member. So they were a live-in nurse for a family member.
Wow.
The youngest person that we know about, not that we serve directly, but that one of our law enforcement partners identified to us, was 3 months old. So
Good night.
I know. So if I can tell you anything, it's that there's not one sort of demographic that is most likely targeted for trafficking. It's an incredibly diverse group of individuals. A good saying is that anybody can be trafficked into any industry at any time. So again, it's an incredibly diverse group of people. To be eligible for our program officially in ATIP, we serve all potential and identified victims and survivors of labor and sex trafficking, regardless of immigration status, so including adults and minors, individuals of all gender identities again, and also foreign-born and U.S. citizens. So we're one of the only programs at the International Institute which will serve foreign-born folks and U.S. citizens.
I think there is, this is my perception, again, my perception, that a lot of the trafficking occurs because of migrant workers or immigration kinds of things. But there is as much trafficking going on with native-born citizens than there probably is with those who are coming in from outside the country. Am I correct or incorrect here?
Absolutely. It's a global problem, obviously, but just here locally, we're responsible for 49 counties on this side of the state, the Eastern District of Missouri. And we see trafficking situations everywhere in that responsible area. And it starts as young as 3 months old, as Anna described, all the way up to the elderly. And it takes all different forms.
Now, you mentioned some things that you do with the ATIP program and training.
Yeah.
And I know, Brian, you also do some training aspects, but you kind of do it a little bit differently. And I talk about the training opportunities that ATIP will provide for groups out in the community, and let's name some of those groups.
Yeah, so in partnership both with the International Institute and St. Louis County Police Department, we can do, basic human trafficking 101 presentations for community groups. So for those who are just part of any sort of group that they'd like to learn more. So we've trained a group of sorority sisters, both who are in college and then out of college. I've trained ethical societies here in the St. Louis area, but we can also do trainings specific to the industries that individuals are in and how they might identify victims of trafficking. So we've done trainings for paramedics and firefighters, other emergency response folks, nurses, both in hospital settings and in family care settings, emergency rooms. We've trained business owners, both for just local business owners or business owners who might be working in hospitality or exotic dance clubs who might be also encountering some victims of trafficking.
Right. And
then Brian is able to lead a wonderful training for identifying and addressing human trafficking for law enforcement.
And let's talk about that in a second, because I want to hit on something that Anna said. So you're just doing a general broad brush 101, but then you give each specific institution things that they should look for because it's really strictly based upon their setting.
It's based on how they're going to see their patients or clients.
Right.
As a paramedic, when do you have opportunities to speak to your patients? In the back of an ambulance.
Right.
So what are specific indicators that you might see at the scene, so at the home or the job site that they're first arriving to, and how that might also get into some of the identifications of trafficking that you can address in transportation.
Okay. Brian, talk a little bit about your training with law enforcement and how is that and what kind of involvement is that?
Yeah, so leaning into what Anna said, what we want to do when we're training law enforcement is we reach out to all of our partners in the area that we're responsible for, and we offer the training to frontline patrol officers at roll calls. We try to gear the training for them towards red flags that they may see, as Anna said, on their calls for service. It could manifest on a domestic violence call. It could manifest on a theft call, a fraud call, a child abuse investigation. All of these things are going to be indicators of a vulnerable person and a person who may or may not be a victim of trafficking or be under control of a trafficker. So what we want to do is point out these red flags to the law enforcement people who are on the front lines. We also try to educate prosecutors, and we educate commanders on the police departments so they understand what they're seeing when it comes across their desk as far as investigations go.
This, for me, I just want to, if I see this happening somewhere, in a neighborhood or somewhere, getting from the person, that's being abused to getting it to law enforcement,
right,
or other people that can help, I think that bridge there seems to me to be really a difficult spot. Because they may be afraid they're going to get deported. You guys can probably speak to this much better than I can. But even approaching some of these people, they may not want to even talk to you about it for fear of retaliation from whoever's perpetrating this kind of stuff. So, is there any suggestion on how I can, as a citizen, as an observer, how I can help with this?
Yeah, so we would always say, in a situation where you see somebody in immediate danger, obviously you're going to want to call 911 and get the police involved. We have trained a lot of law enforcement officers, first responders, to recognize these flags already, and we hope that we get the phone call referrals from these local enforcers so that we can initiate an investigation and get services started for any potential victims. Our model, our trafficking model for the grant is trauma-informed, victim-centered services, that from social services side and from law enforcement. We treat our potential victims as victims like they should be, and we hope that effort in educating the public in that arena of it kind of quells some of the concerns that a victim might have in coming forward, or a witness might have in bringing the issue forward.
Because I'm sure, like Mark said, people who see things, and maybe they went through a training, and then everybody's sense of, they have a heightened sense of looking around and, well, maybe that's it, or maybe that's it. And I'd rather there be a false, maybe this sounds horrible, a false positive than no call made at all.
Right.
Because it could be, but you don't want to, it's kind of like child abuse, calling the child abuse hotline.
Yeah, exactly.
And saying, well, gee, of course, you're not the one to judge that. You're just the one to report it. And then that's somebody else's job to figure out whether it is or it isn't. But at the same time, that person who gets, quote unquote, accused is in that situation having to deal with social service agencies and maybe law enforcement on top of them saying, what's going on here, and maybe it is a false, it's a false alarm.
I don't want it to sound simple, but it seems like the first line of defense is to call 911, because the law enforcement are trained to recognize this and maybe try to figure out what the next steps are. So that's, instead of me or you approaching the person and say, hey, is everything okay here?
Oh, yeah, I'd never do that.
But there are people
We don't recommend that.
No, please don't. I would always recommend calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline, just because of how that system works. Is it's meant, you call it and it's able to connect you to anti-trafficking professionals in your area. So I get these calls, Brian gets these calls, a lot of our other law enforcement partners, and all of the other social service agencies who work in anti-trafficking in the St. Louis region also get these calls. Because if a potential victim of trafficking is calling, the hotline will connect them immediately to that resource, and it can be connected to if they would need law enforcement to support them immediately, or if they would need a social worker or social services to help establish themselves or just get out of the situation as well. Another option is that you can always call me or the Human Trafficking Task Force. So my phone number is 314-745-2512. And in those cases, individuals can call me, whether it be about questions about human trafficking, questions about screening, or if they have a possible case referral. You can tell me just a little bit about the case, and then based on what you're sharing, I can recommend if you should contact law enforcement or contact a social worker. Whenever I get these calls and they request law enforcement, I immediately call Brian and I tell them this is what I received, this is the information that I have. They have allowed me to give you their contact information, so I trust you entirely to go address and look into this case. If they would need a social worker, I can connect them to the variety of social workers that I work here with at the International Institute to connect them to resources.
And what's that number again, Anna?
It is 314-745-2512.
And I want to give the National Human Trafficking Hotline again, 888-373-7888. It seems to me, in just thinking about this, Mark, that that might be a better way to go, to calling the hotline, because then they will get a call from the hotline people, and if law enforcement needs to be involved, it's much faster for them to get law enforcement involved than me calling 911 in the city, which sometimes could be, like the other night, 4 minutes before I got an answer. So 4 minutes can, in an emergency situation, especially in a trafficking situation, I'm not minimizing fires or heart attacks or automobile accidents or whatever, but it seems to me that time is of the essence when somebody's reporting something like that.
Yeah. I like the idea of calling the Human Trafficking Task Force, I think, first, having them vet it, talk to the folks, turn it over to the sergeant, instead of having uniformed officers show up. I think that, unfortunately, it intimidates people. It sometimes scares them.
Or heightens the situation.
Yeah, it makes it sometimes worse.
Right.
Even though they're definitely there to help.
Benefit, our law enforcement are all plainclothes officers, so immediately it diffuses a lot of that tension that can come with being even if I was approaching you with a suit, that's kind of intimidating. Or white coat syndrome in a doctor's office. Having plainclothes officers there to support you immediately diffuses some of that that tension
Your
in the
listeners
situation.
can't see, but the way that I came in today is the way that I go to work every day. And the same for my detectives that work under me. We're all very...
With that Cardinal shirt on? You have a Cardinal shirt on every day?
On game days.
Okay.
Every day's a game day.
And then St. Louis City SC on Saturdays.
There you go.
Okay.
Now, I've got a couple more questions. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll come right back because there are some survivors, and dealing with the situation and having been in situations, there's support even for those who get out of those situations. We're going to talk about that right after this break. So we'll be right back. You're listening to St. Louis in Tune with Arnold Stricker and Mark Langston on the U.S. Radio Network.
At St. Louis in Tune, we strive to bring you informative, useful, and reflective stories, as well as interviews about current and historic issues and events that involve people, places, and things. We cover a wide range of topics, such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and sports, and that's just to name a few. While St. Louis in Tune originates from the Gateway City and covers local topics, we also connect to what's going on nationally as well. If you missed any of our previously aired programs of St. Louis in Tune, simply visit stlintune.com. That's stlintune.com. There you'll find the show notes and everything that was mentioned in that episode and all the other great episodes as well. And if you've got an area that you'd like us to examine deeper, well, just let us know by dropping us a note at stlintune@gmail.com. That's stlintune@gmail.com. St. Louis in Tune. It's heard Monday through Friday on the USRadioNetwork.com and many great radio stations around the U.S. and, of course, right here in St. Louis. Our website again is stlintune.com. Visit us today. That's stlintune.com.
This is Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune on behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page. On behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation, this has been Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune. Welcome back to St. Louis in Tune. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston. We're talking to Anna Foster and Sergeant Brian Shanika. They are both involved in the Human Trafficking Task Force here in the metropolitan St. Louis area. And before we went to break, we had a couple more questions that we were going to talk about. Survivors. There are success stories. We don't want names at all. But I want people to know who are listening out there that there is hope if you are in a situation, or maybe you have a family member who's been pulled into a situation, or you have observed something. There is hope for people to get out of these things. And describe how they can, like if they call up and they get assistance, walk us through what that looks like and then what support they get afterwards. Yeah,
so I specifically just want to touch on a type of case that we see on a regular basis, and that it's based in familial trafficking. That's a situation where a family member is actually victimizing another family member. It doesn't have to be parental to child. It could be relative. We see these instances often, and we also see a lot of success stories that come out of those outcomes. When we identify a person as a potential trafficking victim, our services start immediately, not only on the law enforcement side with investigation and criminal prosecution. We get social service providers involved, educators, medical staff involved. It's like a holistic approach to healing a victim from the beginning to the end. And I can tell you, Sergeant Adam Cavanaugh, who's now retired from St. Louis County, he did this for 20 years before I came on, and he could give you millions of stories of success for children and adults and foreign-born people who have been rescued from trafficking situations. And it's all the same model. We approach it victim-centered, trauma-informed, and begin at the beginning getting them services.
So those services would often include getting their basic immediate needs met. So providing housing, food, medical, and mental health care are crucial for a lot of these folks, because especially after a trafficking experience, that can be a pretty traumatic experience. So providing mental health care and safety is a huge element for a lot of folks, and safety rightfully is a huge concern for folks.
Right.
For a lot of our foreign-born populations, interpretation services are available to them in order to help them maybe get accustomed to the area or to connect to a broader range of services that would be available to them. There's also available resources for immigration relief and criminal relief. So for folks who are undocumented in their trafficking situation, they might be hesitant to come forward as victims of trafficking because if they're undocumented, they might see like, oh, I can't go to law enforcement or I can't go to a service provider because they're going to have me deported or I'm going to get in trouble. There are several immigration relief options for folks if they would choose to stay in the United States, but again, they're not required to, because you can imagine probably most folks don't want to stay in an area which they were abused and exploited.
Right.
When it comes to criminal relief, for folks who have been forced to commit crimes in relation to their trafficking situation, that's something that's called more in the field and recognized more in the field now as forced criminality. So that can be solicitation and sex work, because that is a crime in the state of Missouri. It could also be drug trafficking or drug sales, transportation, theft, stealing cars, any crime that they were forced to commit at the hands of because of their trafficking situation. There's options for criminal relief, because you should not be held accountable for crimes that you were forced to commit.
Right.
So they're survivors after getting out of a trafficking situation, after going through, an appropriate period of healing and addressing their trauma. And it is a lifelong process, because trauma simply doesn't go away.
Right.
But survivors have been able to lead fantastic and fulfilling lives. We have survivors in the St. Louis area who have become survivor advocates, working directly to support victims of trafficking. We have survivor advocates around the country that look to propel or support legislation to better support survivors and provide funding for investigations and service provision. Or you can also choose to live a normal life, become a teacher, social worker, a police officer, a radio host, do anything that you want to do and that you are able to do inherently as a person with rights.
I'm going to throw you a curve here now, because it's the first day of baseball season. Is give me a 15 and 20 second message to people who are victims right now in a trafficking situation. Give them some hope in 15 or 20 seconds.
What I would say to any potential trafficking victim from a law enforcement perspective is you can trust that people who are expert at investigating and assisting with helping these victims, you can trust us. Reach out to us through any means that you can, and understand that we're going to approach it from a victim-centered platform from the beginning. You don't have to worry about being arrested or having your children taken away from you. We don't do that. We need to have the information to get you safe and out of the situation and moving forward. For us, prosecution comes second.
Regardless of immigration status, victimization status, anything that you were forced to do in relation to your trafficking experience, there are people and services here and willing to support you, and we would love to connect you with appropriate resources and get you into a safe place in which you are able to thrive.
We've been talking to Anna Foster, Human Trafficking Task Force Coordinator, and Sergeant Brian Shanika, who's Special Investigations Unit at St. Louis County Police Department, about human trafficking. I want to thank you both for coming in and talking to us about that. And folks, don't forget, Anna gave her number, 314-745-2512, and the National Human Trafficking Hotline is 888-373-7888. Very important topic, and we probably need to do some updates periodically throughout the year and find out how things are going and what other things you all are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
You bet. We're going to come back after a brief break, and we have some other things to discuss on this day. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston of St. Louis in Tune. You're listening to the U.S. Radio Network.
Thanks for listening to St. Louis in Tune. On each and every show, we strive to bring you informative, useful, and reflective stories and interviews about current and historic issues and events that involve people, places, and things. Hey, we cover a wide range of content in the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, health, history, housing, and humor, justice, and sports, and that's just to name a few. While St. Louis in Tune originates from the Gateway City and covers local topics, we connect to what is going on nationally as well. If you missed any of our previously aired programs of St. Louis in Tune, simply visit stlintune.com. That's stlintune.com. There you'll find every show from our first to our most current. Use the search engine and look for a show that might interest you. And if you have an area that you'd like us to examine deeper, let us know. Just drop us a line at stlintune@gmail.com. That's stlintune@gmail.com. St. Louis in Tune, heard Monday through Friday on the usradionetwork.com and many great stations around the U.S. and, of course, right here in St. Louis. Our website again is stlintune.com. stlintune.com.
This is Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune on behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page. On behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation, this has been Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune. Welcome back to St. Louis in Tune. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston. And, I missed the quote of the day, or the what do I want to call it? Return to civility. I missed the return to civility. So here we go, folks.
All right, here we go.
The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we do fall. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we do fall.
I agree. I don't know what I can add to that.
And based upon our previous conversation about trafficking, those who are in a situation like that, getting out of that is just like a new day, a new dawn.
Right.
Yeah.
Our next time we talk with them, and they were great. The first step, how do you get out of that? That's just that first step. Then the second step will come, and the third.
Right.
Boy, that first step to me, when I hear the conversation that you guys had, earlier, it was just so. How do you just even start to get out of something like that?
Right.
That's just something that's deep and dark and,
Right.
Just a hole horrible. It's just terrible. I can't imagine, just slave. It's being a slave.
It is.
And
It's modern day slavery.
Yeah. Illegal things and it's just terrible.
I was surprised when he was talking about how relatives will use relatives.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Oh, yeah. Isn't that heartbreaking?
It is.
It's kind of heartbreaking.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Now, I know you are the man of what is today. What is the day of today?
I'm working on today of the day. Yep.
Today of the day. So I do know that it is something Doctor's Day today.
It is.
Like Acknowledge Your Doctor Day.
Uh-huh. Appreciating your physician.
There we go.
That help our lives every day.
That's right.
I know based on the amount of pills I take every day.
Yeah.
I don't take that many pills, folks. I know people that take a lot of pills, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I fear that someday I'm going to be it's like, how many can you take?
It's Thank Your Pharmacist Day.
Right. And Thank Your Doctor Day. It's all kind of together. This is an interesting thing today. It's grass is always browner on the other side of the fence.
What?
Learn how to appreciate your own life with some great that's going on. The grass is not necessarily greener on the other side.
Now, I've heard...
That's why they're saying it's browner.
Browner,
because
yeah.
it's greener on your side.
Now, I've heard two things related to that. The grass might be greener on the other side, but you still have to mow it. And then secondly is, why is the grass over there greener? Because there's more fertilizer that's put on it. But that wasn't the word that was used in this particular thing that I read.
Oh, all right. That's good. I like that.
Maybe that's why it was browner.
Fitness recovery day from your daily routine of exercise. Do you have a daily routine of exercise?
I actually rode this morning.
Did you?
Not rode. I ROWED.
Oh,
I rode.
Rowing.
I have a rowing machine.
Wow.
And I rode, and then I got one of them green smoothies to I said, throw some protein in that too.
Ooh.
To get my recovery back.
Did you make the green smoothie?
No.
Oh.
I went somewhere and bought it.
I know. I love those things, but I just don't make them.
No. You can't make them like they do.
No,
unless you
that's
have
true.
the equipment.
That's true. You're right. Yeah. And who keeps those kind of vegetables in the house all the time?
Never.
They'll go bad before I get to the end of them.
Jack LaLanne did.
Oh, that's right, Jack LaLanne.
He lived pretty long, and
He did.
tow a barge with his teeth swimming when he was 80 or something.
Yeah, and he had a jumpsuit. Didn't he wear a jumpsuit?
Oh, yeah.
A jumpsuit. You remember that thing?
I remember watching the Jack LaLanne.
Wow.
Was it Athletic Hour?
Oh, my gosh.
Calisthenic Hour?
This is you're really going way,
I'm really
way
old.
Yeah, that's pretty far back. That's all I can tell you. Okay, let's see. What else is it? National I'm in Control Day.
Mission Control could say
I know. Yeah, make sure you're in control. Let's see. How about National Pencil Day? Mm-hmm. Did you know that one pencil can write a lot of words? They have a prediction on how many words one pencil, your number 2 pencil.
I was going to say, which number is it? Number 2?
I don't think I've ever seen a number 1 pencil. But
I haven't either.
Is that those ones that are the mechanical ones that?
No, it's
that's not a number 2.
It's based
it's
upon how the lead is either harder or softer, and I can't remember which way is softer and which way is harder.
Is that real lead in there, or graphite?
I think it's graphite.
Yeah. It wouldn't be. I mean, we can't drink out of lead pipes, and you shouldn't have lead paint. Why are you going to give a preschooler a lead pencil?
Well, you never know.
No, you never. You don't never know. So it says here that they can write up to 45,000 words.
Wow, we just have to get kids to use them.
Wouldn't that be something? National Virtual Vacation Day. I'm always taking a virtual vacation. Take a walk in the park day.
Okay.
Not a bad idea.
Nope.
Of course, it is opening day. I think in St. Louis it should be. It's opening day for the Cardinals.
A local holiday?
Yeah. I mean, we are a big town for that kind of stuff.
Where do you define local then? Do you go out to St. Charles County, Jeff County, Lincoln County, go over on the east side,
I don't know. That's good.
Because they have these holidays for somebody in Illinois. Like, who in the world is that? Like, I recognize Abe Lincoln, but who's that guy?
Who is that guy? Anesthesia Tech Day. So appreciate your anesthesiologist. Isn't that
Your
right?
tech.
It's Eiffel Tower Day.
That's what I felt.
Is that right? Dance Marathon Day. Oh, Crayola Crayon Day.
Oh, is this to compete with the pencil day? How many circles can you make with a crayon before it goes bad?
We're getting to the end. National Clams on the Half Shell Day.
Oh, geez.
Who comes up with that? Now, come on.
These were probably all passed by state legislatures.
Yeah. So, wait, it's National Crayon Crayola, which crayon, I guess, is a brand.
Right, kind of like Kleenex.
But it's also National Crayon Day.
Maybe that's why.
So something funny's going on there. I'm telling you, something funny's going. National Farm Workers Day kind of goes with.
Do they use crayons?
I don't know. National Prom Day.
Seems a little early for prom.
My wife and I were in Macy's. I haven't been in Macy's in forever. And we went to West County Mall.
Oh, yeah.
On 270 in Manchester.
Yeah, right.
And you know, who said the malls were dead? Because I went in that place. It was hustling and bustling.
Well, there's that one, and then there's the one over in Brentwood, and then the one out in St. Peter's. I think those are the only malls that are left.
That are people even go to.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's there. Yeah. I didn't see any
Plaza, not.
I didn't see any mall walkers. Yeah, no.
No, and they loved to mall walk.
I don't know if they're still around or not. National She's Funny That Way Day. National Tater Day. You like tater tots?
If they're really, really crisp.
With a little cheese on them?
Now you're making it like, what's that stuff called? French fries with cheese and stuff on them.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about.
Let me get back to my story about Macy's. And we went in, and there was a whole section on prom dresses. I have never seen so many prom dresses. It was crazy.
I didn't know that they were like a prom.
Oh, it's a whole department. It's a whole department in the department store.
Oh, my gosh.
The prom, I know. Oh, here, don't forget this one. World Backup Day. Back up that computer.
Oh.
Back it up. I know.
All the time.
I know. We're getting really close to the end of the show here, but those are just a few of my favorite days.
So we have to get into sometime the contradictory legislature, which they believe in small government, but they're making more large. And I say that just because of some things that they've done. It's local control versus state control. They want local control, but if it works out for them, otherwise it's state control. I know there's some things that have to be done like that. But I want to give one funny out here before we leave for the day. And let's see here. How about this one? Chocolate is vital for our survival. Dinosaurs didn't have chocolate, and look what happened to them.
Point well taken. You're wise beyond your years.
Yes, I'm wise behind my ears.
Oh, behind your ears, right.
Well, folks, that's all for this hour. Thank you for listening. Don't forget, when the Martians invade, there is only one race, and it has always only been one race, the human race, and every one of us have different characteristics and is uniquely valuable. St. Louis in Tune is a production of Motif Media Group and the U.S. Radio Network. For St. Louis in Tune, co-host Mark Langston, I'm Arnold Stricker. Remember to walk worthy and let your light shine.